My name is Eleanor Whitmore. I am 112 years old. When people visit me now, they lean forward with a kind of reverence, as if age itself has made me sacred. They ask what I ate, how often I walked, whether I drank tea or coffee. They want a formula, something they can measure and repeat. But the truth is far less tidy. I did not live this long because of what I consumed. I lived this long because of what I learned to carry. I was born in 1914, just weeks before the world tipped into the First World War. I do not remember the war itself, of course, but I remember its shadow. I remember the hushed voices of adults in the kitchen, the way my mother folded letters with trembling hands. I remember neighbors who stopped appearing on Sunday mornings. The world was loud with conflict, but inside our home, there was silence. Not peaceful silence, protective silence. We did not speak of fear, we endured it. As a child, I was observant. I noticed the way my father's jaw tightened when he read the newspaper. I noticed how my mother swallowed her worry before it reached her lips. No one explained things to children then. We were expected to stay small, stay quiet, and stay out of the way. But silence has weight. And even as a little girl, I felt it pressing against my ribs. When the war ended, there were celebrations in the streets. Flags, music, laughter that sounded almost desperate. I watched from our window and wondered how people could move so quickly from grief to joy. I learned something important that year. The world does not pause for anyone's pain. It keeps turning, whether you are ready or not. The Great Depression arrived when I was 15. That is when I first understood what it meant to be afraid of tomorrow. My father lost steady work. My mother stretched meals with water and hope. We mended everything, clothes, shoes, even our pride. I wanted to help, so I found small jobs, sewing, cleaning, minding younger children. I discovered I had nimble hands and a patient manner. What I did not have was a voice. In those days, girls were praised for obedience, not opinion. When men spoke, women listened. When elders decided, the young complied. If you felt overwhelmed, you folded that feeling neatly and tucked it away. No one called it emotional suppression. They called it good manners. By the time the Second World War began, I was 25 and newly married. My husband, Thomas, was gentle in ways that startled me. He asked what I thought about things. He looked at me when I spoke, as if my words had weight. It felt unfamiliar and dangerous, like standing in sunlight after years indoors. When he left for service, I stood at the train station with hundreds of other women, each of us trying to memorize the shape of a man's face. We waved bravely. We swallowed tears. We told one another we would be fine. War is loud in history books, bombs, gunfire, speeches. But for those who wait, war is silent. It is the empty chair at dinner. It is the unopened letter. It is lying awake at night imagining footsteps that never come. Thomas returned, thinner but alive. Many did not. We built a life from ration books and relief. We had 2 children, a boy and a girl. I poured myself into motherhood the way my own mother had, thoroughly and without complaint. But here is what no one tells you about silence. It does not disappear. It accumulates. Each time I felt overwhelmed and chose not to speak, something inside me hardened. When I was anxious, I smiled. When I was exhausted, I insisted I was fine. When I was angry, I convinced myself I was ungrateful for feeling so. Anxiety had no name in our home. It was simply nervousness, or imagination, or weakness. I lay awake at night planning for disasters that never came. I rehearsed conversations I would never have. I feared losing the people I loved so intensely that I sometimes forgot to enjoy them. Outwardly, I was composed. Inwardly, I was a storm. When I was 43, my mother died. Grief arrived like a thief in broad daylight. I had known loss before, friends, neighbors, but this was different. She had been the quiet architect of my world. Without her, I felt unmoored. At her funeral, people praised her strength. They admired how she had never complained. I stood beside her coffin and realized that I did not know what she had truly felt about her life. I knew her duties, her sacrifices, her recipes, but I did not know her dreams. Silence had taken that from us. That realization unsettled me more than death itself. I began to wonder what my own children would one day say about me. Would they remember my cooking, my discipline, my tidy home? Or would they know my fears, my hopes, the private poetry of my thoughts? For the first time, I considered breaking the pattern. It began small. I started keeping a journal. At first, I wrote cautiously, as if someone might scold me for honesty. I described the weather, the errands, the children's antics. Then, slowly, I began writing what I felt. I wrote about loneliness. I wrote about resentment. I wrote about love so fierce it frightened me. Putting words to emotions did not erase them, but it made them visible. And once visible, they were less monstrous. The 1960s arrived with noise, protests, music, rebellion. My daughter marched for causes I barely understood. She spoke openly about equality, about the right to choose her own path. I watched her with a mixture of pride and discomfort. She said things I had swallowed for decades. Part of me wanted to warn her to be careful. The other part wanted to applaud. One evening, after a particularly heated discussion about women's roles, she turned to me and asked, "What did you want, Mama, when you were my age?" The question stunned me. No one had ever asked me that so directly. I opened my mouth and found silence. Not because I did not have an answer, but because I had buried it so deeply I could not reach it. That night, I lay awake and searched my memories. I remembered wanting to study literature. I remembered loving the rhythm of language, the way words could bend reality. I remembered setting that desire aside because it seemed impractical. The next day, I told her. My voice trembled, but I told her. It was the first time I had spoken a long-buried truth aloud. The world did not collapse. No one shamed me. My daughter simply listened, her eyes soft. In that moment, I understood something profound. The hardest thing I had survived was not war or poverty or grief. It was decades of self-erasure. Thomas died when I was 78. By then, we had grown old in comfortable familiarity. Losing him felt like losing a limb. The house echoed differently. The bed was too large. I feared that without him, silence would swallow me whole. But I was no longer the young woman who folded her feelings away. I joined a local reading group. I spoke about books, about ideas. I admitted when I felt lonely. I allowed neighbors to bring casseroles and company. I told my grandchildren stories, not just about historical events, but about my own doubts and mistakes. The more I spoke, the lighter I felt. Longevity is often described as a blessing, and it is. But it is also a responsibility. When you live long enough, you become a bridge between eras. You remember when women could not vote, when telephones were luxuries, when news traveled slowly. You witness change so rapid it makes your bones ache. What matters, I have learned, is not merely surviving change. It is participating in it. Now, at 112, my body is slower. My hands tremble when I pour tea. I need help with stairs. But my mind is clearer than it has ever been. Not because I have all the answers, but because I am no longer afraid of my own questions. Young people ask me for advice. They expect wisdom wrapped in certainty. Instead, I tell them this: speak. Speak when you are afraid. Speak when you are unsure. Speak even if your voice shakes. Silence can be dignified. It can be strategic. But when it becomes habitual, it steals pieces of you. I survived wars that reshaped continents. I survived economic collapse and personal loss. I survived the deaths of people I once believed I could not live without. Each of those experiences carved me, but none hollowed me out as completely as pretending I had no inner world. If I have a secret, it is this: endurance alone is not enough. You must also allow yourself to exist fully within your own life. Sometimes I sit by the window of my small room and watch the world move, cars gliding past, children with devices I can barely comprehend, conversations conducted through invisible signals. The world is louder now than it has ever been. And yet, I worry that many still suffer in silence, just as we did. If my long life has any purpose beyond personal survival, I hope it is this testimony: your feelings are not inconveniences. Your voice is not a burden. History may remember wars and leaders, inventions and revolutions, but the quiet revolutions, the ones inside a single human heart, are just as significant. I was born into a century that valued restraint above revelation. I will likely leave this world in a century that prizes expression. I have lived on both sides of that divide, and I can tell you, without hesitation, that the bravest thing I ever did was not enduring hardship. It was finally speaking.